Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hi, great to see you all. Welcome to our wonderful webinar, and I'll be sharing some slides and inviting some guests in, and we'll have a great time together, some activities as well. So you can't just hang out there. You need to actually participate a little bit. I'm Jen Walinga. I'm a professor at Royal Roads University, and I'll tell you a little bit about our university in a minute as well, but I just wanted to wave and show that I'm a human being and here in Victoria, BC, and see some of your smiling faces. All right, so let's get started. Looks like most people are admitted now, and we will rock along. We always like to start with any presentation either on campus or off by acknowledging where our beautiful university is located, and acknowledge and thank the Lekwungen and Kosapsum people, also known as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations communities, for allowing us to live and work and play and learn on their lands. We also give thanks to the ancestors, the supernatural ones, hereditary leaders and matriarchs, creatures big and small, for looking after the rich resources and cultural teachings of this beautiful land. And I live, so right now I'm in my house, and I also live on the Lekwungen territory in Cadbro Bay, and this is my favorite walk with my dog through Mystic Vale. And interestingly, this is my walk down to my office at Royal Roads on campus. So it's funny how parallel my work and home lives really are. Of course, we're not on campus right now, and I really miss the rose garden. This is right outside of my office. I literally have to smell the roses every time I walk anywhere on campus. And this is good old Ryan Reynolds posing in front of our beloved castle that we've inherited. And that is our former president replicating the pose and having a bit of fun on Insta with Ryan. And this is our lovely campus. So I'd like to start by sharing the land that we operate on at Royal Roads, because it is quite stunning. It's surrounded by gardens. We've inherited an amazingly rich history, and quite a checkered history, I would say, as well. But we look out over the Esquimalt Lagoon and the Olympic Mountains, and in behind we have 300 hectares of old growth forest. And we leverage that amazing campus for the learning that we try to facilitate at Royal Roads University. So Royal Roads is quite a unique university, though, in that we don't have varsity programs. We have a real range of working professional learners and international learners who are mostly learning, I would say, about social change. All our programs are geared toward positive social change. Our model, we have an acronym ACT, ACT. It's all about positive social change, transformational learning. And the A stands for applied and authentic, the C for caring and community-based, and the T for transformational. And so all of our programs are geared in that way. And that's why I think it's so appropriate to host a webinar series on sport, leadership, and social change through our campus. Because I've found, having taught there for over 20 years now, that a lot of my students have an interest in sport, and I certainly do as well. But that sport speaks to so many areas, so many realms of learning and living and working, development, diversity and inclusion, education and environment and climate, equity and human rights, health and wellness and well-being, media, communication and peace and conflict. And our programs try to speak to these principles and concepts as well. And our schools are organized to really reflect these key issues in our society. So sport is just kind of a thread that travels across all of our programs. We also have a unique capacity at Royal Roads to welcome professionals into our learning environment and acknowledge the learning gained in different contexts. We have something called flexible admission, and we are one of the, I think, the very first university in the world to introduce this concept of flexible admission, where we acknowledge for credit your professional learning in other contexts. So when you've worked for 10 years in government or any sector or industry, but we also then acknowledge athletic experience. And so this is one of our beloved students, Andrea Burke. She represented Canada at the World Cup for the the rugby 15s team. And then she conducted her research, she did her master's in leadership on rugby and the culture of sport. And we have a partnership with what's called Game Plan. They support athletes in their transition post-sport career into professional career outside of sport, and sometimes within sport. But we acknowledge the learning that athletes have gained through their sport. And I think that's perfectly appropriate for the nature of these webinar episodes as well, because we really will be talking about what we learn from sport. So episode 1 in particular is going to provide a bit of an overview of the series, but it's also going to delve more deeply into what do we think sport really has to give the world? How could it offer those concepts and learnings more effectively? Because we know sport is powerful, right? Sport plays so many roles in society. It is one of the most galvanizing activities in our world. And I know that because I've done a little bit of research even just this morning. When you look at how many people engage in viewing the Olympics, for instance, the 2012 Olympics, and one of our guests is in London, in the UK right now. The 2012 Olympics in London garnered 219.4 million viewers. Right? Those are committed viewers, because the Olympics, of course, and Paralympics after them last for many weeks. So that's amazing. Compare that to the Super Bowl, 100 million. And last night's election was 23.2 million. So what's important to people, right? Sport. I think sport's really important. And it has such a great power to engage and teach and learn. Of course, we can learn terrible things from sport as well. But our mission here is to try to leverage and lift out what we can learn that's really great for our society from sport. And I think we can do that multiple ways. There are lots, the thing I love about sport, but it really applies to dance and art and literature as well, music, is that people can participate in so many different ways. Yes, you can be the athlete, but you can be a spectator, you can be an official, a volunteer, the parent, so many ways to participate in sport, right? Without having to be that champion in the little boat like Adam Van Koeverden here, one of my faves. But participating in sport is one way to learn and distill with facilitation, with guidance, with support from your coaches and your supporters in your community. Because again, we can learn terrible things from sport too. We can learn about dehumanizing others and ourselves even. And we want to make sure that we're facilitating really positive learning out of our sport experiences and participation. So I really want to enhance participation in sport. So I think that's a great avenue for learning. And that sport is truly educational. But I think story is also a way that we can leverage sport more effectively. So people like Adam Van Koeverden have great stories. You know, when he won his gold medal in his single kayak here, he wasn't really expected to win the gold. And he went through this really cool problem-solving process right before. He'd forgotten all his stuff. You know, he was late and he'd left something on the bus, and he didn't have his glasses or his music or anything to kind of get him ready for his race, but he just problem solved really well and thought to himself, well, why do I need that? And what do I need it for? And can I recreate it? And my theory of the research I've done around sport and performance is that when we go through that problem solving process, we actually leverage optimal performance. And I attribute his gold medal to the fact that he had to go through that insightful problem solving experience, because he went on to win the gold and set a record in the meantime. So there's so much learning in the participation, but he needs to tell that story as well. And then I love the fact that he's translating what he's learning in sport into his professional life and in politics. And he's ended up choosing to represent at the federal level in Canada, and he's done a really great job so far. He's been assigned some excellent portfolios related to sport, so wonderful to hear his ideas and his ability to be patient and do things well. So not only do we want to enhance participation, but we want to also encourage people to tell their stories. I know for a fact, I've told my Olympic experience and journey story hundreds of times in different contexts. And I know from those who listened that they really take those principles that I've distilled and translated into their context. They've taken that and really applied it to their lives as well. Working with a bunch of sports scientists right now, and you know, they tell me what it is they've heard and taken from my learning my stories into their lives. So powerful ways to share the learning of sport. My first guest today, I have two guests. I always have to rely on buddies. I'm definitely a crew person, right? I rode for many years and I'm in a single now, but I think I prefer always to be in that crew boat with a buddy. And I have to point out, I love this picture that I found of Larissa here, because she's sitting here with my very first rowing coach, Carol Love, who still coaches for Canada and is an Olympian herself. And then we have Larissa Beezenthal. And Larissa has been so kind to come today. She's going to be sharing her stories and her experiences and her involvement in other things in the world and how she's translating her learning from sport into those. And here she is with her two beautiful daughters. So we'll meet Larissa a little bit later in the program. And I've also reached out to my new friend, Cathy Bishop, who is in London right now and a rower as well. So you see, I reach out to my buddies who are close by, fellow rowers. And of course, I'm scheming to build crews with these women as well into the future. So here's Cathy rowing with her partner in the pair. She's had a huge success as an Olympian, but she's also translated her learning into different spheres of society, and she'll share her stories a little bit later on in the program as well. So I look forward to that. And I'm going to blab on for a few minutes and also engage you in some activities to foster a real reflection on how sport is impacting the world, how it impacts you, and to reflect on, what we could be doing better to leverage the power of sport. So I'm going to ask you this question and invite you to participate if you're on your phone or you're on your computer, to go to menti.com, it's right there, and then type in that little code. It's just a shared workspace where we can conduct a poll, and then I can share it in front of everybody. So we kind of build it together, all virtually, of course. All right. Oh, this is cool. And I've done this a couple times now with different groups, and I get all different results all the time. And like I said, I didn't have Invictus in there. I found that clip later and then forgot to add it to the poll, but it's pretty neat to see. And I welcome you to add to your explanation in the chat as well. What made you choose what you've chosen? And they're all important. They're all great. They all have social impact, as we can feel in our hearts when we watch those clips of different movements. But what makes you choose one over the other? I have reasons for every single one of them, which is my whole point of this webinar, is to illustrate that all of these areas of sport have I think, a responsibility, to teach and develop people, and teach and develop society as well, and share the messages. Wasn't that beautiful in that final clip? I love the victims without victories without victims, and within these walls there is light, your light. So good. Thank you for playing. And yeah, type in the chat any comments that you have about why do you choose. We have a lot of people choosing grassroots. And it's interesting, right? It's where all the volunteers are. We don't pay anybody to coach a little elementary group, and I'm not sure why. It's one of the most important fundamental areas of development, and we want to make sure those kids are supported and on the right path around sport, and have these principles of, like we watched in the final clip, of friendship and helping one another and collaborative competition.
I can speak to why I chose grassroots. Just because in my experience, it's created that spark, and that initial spark with people who didn't even know maybe what the rules of soccer were, or didn't even know that was a possibility for them. It's when I think about seeing sports on the TV at the Olympics or wherever, that also starts a spark. But I think for me, in my experience, grassroots just really connects that kid or that teenager to possibility in an embodiment kind of way, as well as connecting them to people in their community. That's why I chose it.
Thank you for sharing. And Larissa and I were talking yesterday about the Olympic moment, and I think often people think we're talking about when you were at the Olympics, but it isn't. It's the moment when you discovered, when you were inspired by the Olympics, You know, I remember looking through a little book on Montreal 1976 when women were finally allowed to row and thinking I was going to be the next Canadian 800 runner at, 12 years old. I just had to take a minute off my time and I'd be there. But these moments when you're inspired as a kid, right, by a coach or a friend or a game, or I love that quote from the woman in the racing chair, and how once she got in that chair, I felt the same way in a boat. So there are these lovely moments that we have to have some caregivers out there to make sure we foster those sparks and those lights. Hey? Thank you. I have one more little video for you. It's quite cute, but it frames the next concept or theme for the rest of this episode around the power of sport, not just to inspire on the field, like these young men often do, but beyond. You know, the All Blacks are known for a real commitment to culture, their own national culture, but also developing a culture across their team. And people have been studying and watching them. And what I love about this team is that they've demonstrated how caring for each other and their culture of their team and the culture of their place, where they come from, also translates into performance. You know, they're one of the most winningest teams in the world. So don't tell me that paying attention to kindness and care and honesty and authenticity doesn't help you perform. It does. But the other thing this little clip illustrates is what we can learn from sport and how sport learnings can translate into social change, positive social action. Love that little video because of all that it embodies. Not only is it having some fun with it, but it, trying to illustrate that point that we all have a social responsibility no matter what our endeavor, but sport plays an important role. I think, again, because it is so galvanizing, so many people participate in so many different ways, that it's one of the big unifiers in our world and has a lot of potential, just like human beings do when we're introducing them to sport. And I think it requires, like I was saying, some kind of caregiving, some coaching, some facilitation, though, in order to foster these kinds of learnings. This is my daughter in the middle here playing some rugby. She had to play rugby with boys until she was about 15 because there was no girls rugby. There now is in our community because of the devotion and commitment of our national team sevens players who have made sure that every high school has a rugby team now. There's quite a thriving community and league for young girls. But here Ali is in the middle of what looks like just chaos, doesn't it? But there's order to this chaos. It's called a maul, and she's got the ball and she's pushing it forward with the help of her buddies. She wanted to accompany me to a conference when she was younger, and because it was in Hawaii. And I said, sure, you can come if you present at the conference as well. There's a kid track because, of course, they anticipated professors bringing their families to Hawaii. And so she did. She pulled together a little presentation, and it was really fascinating to watch her and listen to her come up with these concepts of what a girl who plays rugby can teach organizational leaders. It was a leadership conference. And I just thought these were really quite insightful, and it got really, frankly, carved out a whole research path for me and program around education through sport, or learning through sport, and values through sport. But these are some really super insights. Love this concept of passing backward to go forward and waiting until someone was up to speed before you pass them the ball in rugby. I often in communication use the metaphor of a good pass to illustrate what it takes to ensure that your communication is effective. It's not only the responsibility of the passer or the receiver, it's both. It's a partnership always, right? And so to be thinking about, is that person ready to receive the ball? And what can I do to make sure that it is a good pass? Not in rugby what they call a hospital pass, which you huck it up in the air and then they hope they catch it, but meanwhile they get smashed just as they're catching it. And these ideas of creating your confidence and earning respect through creating your own opportunities. And then I love this final one, and I think it's one of the reasons why rugby is such a favorite sport of mine, is that everyone has a role and that there's a place for everybody. Loved watching girls rugby, such an amazing avenue for every type, shape, size of girl and interest. And so it appeals to so many different girls. So it's been a great sport for young women for sure to discover themselves. I have another activity for you that you can be working on the side, and we'll come back to it a little bit later in the program. There we go. It's a big canvas. And so this is a great little tool I always want to share with people too. You get quite a few free ones to start. You click on this little red dot down here, the little plus sign, or double click anywhere on the canvas and you can start writing something. So what have I learned through sport? Well, I've learned about eyes in your own boat. And I could add a little picture there or something from online, or I can link to something. It's just a great shared space for people to use. So I know a lot of us are online right now, and I always like to highlight this tool. It's very powerful. And so I'll come back to this once you've all had a chance to make your own entries, and then see where we're at and what we can learn from one another. So the big question, what did we learn through sport? What have you learned through sport? And it doesn't mean you have to be an athlete to learn through sport, right? We can learn from watching other people's stories unfold, our different experiences. It's wonderful to see, though, so many of the athletes that I've encountered or had the pleasure to meet participating in different leadership roles. So it also begs the question of, are athletes supposed to be role models? I would argue yes. I think it's just my opinion, but I think we all have a responsibility to do our best for society, but particularly when you're involved in sport, because it does have so many beautiful concepts and principles that I challenge athletes to learn and then share and apply in their other realms of their life. So we have here people participating in an athlete's can conversation about safe sport. We've got Adam and Coubertin, I mentioned earlier, playing a big role politically. We've got Claire Hughes, who's a double Olympian in winter and summer, cycling and skating, and who is responsible for initiating a mental health initiative called Bell Let's Talk. We've got this wonderful beauty here, Tricia Smith. I was lucky enough to row with her back in the day, and now she leads our Canadian Olympic Committee. Fabulous. And I know that this is Kath Bishop's former partner, Catherine Granger. We were lucky enough to hear her speak, and I know we have Kath Bishop coming to speak at our next AGM for Rowing Canada, and Kath Granger is now leading UK sport. So wonderful to see athletes really leveraging what they've learned, translating it into leadership in other realms, giving back to sport. And I really want to highlight this concept of that there are lots of ways to win through sport. And this will feed into the conversations that Kath and Laryssa will be leading as well. Such a great story here, right, of our Canadian and US buddy, both winning gold medals, tying in their swimming race. The trouble is, I think sport is also in crisis. So not only do I call upon people to really leverage sport and share what they've learned and do sport in a way that's good for the world, but also recognize that we're in danger of not only losing, I don't think we'll ever lose sport, but it's in crisis right now. While 80% of Canadians, for instance, believe it's a priority, they believe that sport participation has all this potential to promote values and different things like commitment and teamwork and excellence, fair play, etc. We also see a decrease in participation. We see increases in issues like doping, abuse, cheating, and violence. There's an increasing winning at all costs. And in both of our countries, Kath's and ours, that we have this, guiding framework that really does put a lot of pressure on this idea of winning at all costs, or medals are all that matter. But there are so many other things that matter in sport. And of course we want to win. Of course we like doing our best and striving for gold. But there are other elements to that performance that are important as well, and we can't forget about that. We have increasing life stresses and pressure, especially during the pandemic, which is also getting in the way of participation. We heard from Kath earlier this morning that the UK is just heading into a lockdown, so now that's going to put pressure on kids being able to participate in grassroots sport. People are facing economic challenges, and I see a big issue around just a lack of coaching support and lack of coaching with these extra life pressures. People don't always have the time to donate their time, and just generally a lack of time and resources. But we do know that sport has the potential to do so much in the world. We have to protect it. We have to do it well. And I call on everybody to really step up and support sport by ensuring that we are leading sport in a way that's truly productive and honoring that Olympic charter and that concept that Olympism is a place sport is to place sport at the service of harmonious development of humankind with a view to promoting a peaceful society concerned with the preservation of human dignity. We have so many great stories where we've seen this true. I always think of the Jesse Owens and Liz Long story, right? Where they're arch rivals in the triple jump or long jump. And Jesse was struggling. This is the 36 games, right? In Nazi Germany. And it's just what an amazing friendship these two struck up. And Jesse was struggling with his performance and Luz was watching him. Now Luz could have kept his cards close and said, well, you look good to me. But instead he helped him and he told him that look, you're taking off just a little bit too early for your jump. You can leave it a little bit longer. So Jesse took his advice and guess what? Jesse wins the gold, Luz comes second. That's collaborative competition. We need each other. We need each other in sport. We're not there to destroy one another. We're not there to overpower another. It's about collaborative competition, challenging one another. When I looked across at the women I raced, I knew them all well. We trained with them all, Germany and in with New Zealanders and the Brits and the Australians and the US, tons with the US girls. They were like our sisters. We look across and, you know, you smile because you want them to do well. That's the whole point. We all want to do our best and challenge each other, and you'll love each other. So now I want to welcome Larissa Beezenthal. She told me a wonderful story about never taking away someone's dream. Larissa is probably the most medaled rower in Canada. She's this unassuming athlete, I would say, and she certainly doesn't brag about her many, many accomplishments, but look at this list of medals. Between 5 years, you know, 8 world level medals. She's coached in Canada, the Australia. She's parent of 2 lovely, amazing athletes herself. Directs the rowing program at Brentwood College, and now is getting involved at the really cool initiative, the Olympic Values Education Project, and has a cool video to share about that as well. So I'm going to stop sharing right now and welcome Larissa to the stage, and just take your time. Let's, you know, introduce yourself, tell us your stories, and we've made you a co-host. If you want to share your video, that should work out just fine too. All right. Thank you. Welcome, Larissa. Thanks so much for joining. Oh, can't hear you for some reason. And that's okay. What we could do is sometimes with Zoom, if you log out and log back in, it'll work fine. And we could start with Cathy as well. That's totally fine. Just flip the 2 of you and carry on. Awesome. Okay, here we go. Dr. Cathy Bishop. Again, another multi-Olympian, multi-medalist over the course of her career in sport. A diplomat, professor, works at Cambridge School of Business, and is also now consulting to organizations and a business coach. She's written a book called The Long Win, which I'm sure she'll tell us a bit about, and also is involved in something called the True Athlete Project, among other things, I'm sure. And I love this. She's got Jason Dorland, who's one of the people who has reviewed her book in a very positive way. And Jason's another fellow rower. He lives here on the island, up island, on Vancouver Island here, and has written his own number of books, I think, on sport and performance, and arrived at some of the same insights. So I thought that was a lovely synchronicity as well. So welcome, Cathy Bishop. Great to see you.
Thank you. Great to be here. Very exciting to be here. Where shall I focus? A little bit, I suppose, just echoing perhaps some of my different perspectives on this. I mean, I've been thinking, you know, for the last kind of couple of decades about the purpose of sport, about what it means almost to make sense of my own journey, a kind of 10 years of ferocious intensity training as an Olympian, and then sort of thinking, you know, what was that about for me personally, but also what was I part of? What was I part of something that had a bigger impact both within my sport and then also within the Olympic movement? Also kind of, I suppose I totally share the desire and the, you know, that wonderful potential that sport has for social change, but also that frustration that sometimes sport is used for less good reasons, or it's corrupted by the commercialism. And how do we get back to the potential of it? I think, you know, for me, I'd say that, you know, sport is one of our best tools for exploring humanity. And that means we explore some of the dark side, as well as some of the, the real potential of what's possible, how we could move to a kind of better place, a better world, and how sport can play a role in creating like a common language, a common currency within which to understand values like respect, collaboration, and that sense of, everyone has their own place, that equality as well. I mean, interestingly, I kind of, one of the most powerful ways in which I saw sport really affect social change was when I was working as a diplomat. And there was this wonderful little project. I was working in Bosnia, beautiful city of Sarajevo, and the capital of Bosnia, which had gone through this terrible period of civil war in the breakup of the former Yugoslavia. And there was this amazing charity having a huge impact through football and combining football and mine education. So there was a tragic number of young children who were being lost playing on the mountains, just playing on wasteland, playing in places that still had mines all over them. And there was a real, kind of conventional education wasn't really getting the message across. But the power of coming to a football game, a football session, where they were excited, they were engaged, they were motivated, they felt powerful, they felt able to have responsibility and make decisions. And then to learn about it in the context of playing football, rather than someone lecturing you at school, had such a different impact on their behavior and their ability to take on the message and realize that they had to be proactive about this. They had to make some different changes. This wasn't just passive knowledge to take on board. This was knowledge that they needed to process and then put into practice when they were next deciding where they were going to play. And it was a wonderful charity that had kind of amazing impact. A small charity, but again, that sort of power of, we're so engaged when we're involved in sport. We're so, we're emotionally living it, as we all did when we watched those videos earlier. And that for me is the real power of sport. But I totally agree, we're in this sort of crisis place where we've also lost a bit of the sense of what the values and the ethos is for sport. You mentioned there the kind of, the roots of Olympism around the values of respect and equality and friendship. And, again, if you look at martial arts, they have a wonderful underpinning of, that sense of betterment of society and, humility, no ego orientation, a mastery mindset. This isn't about beating others and being better than others. And yet some of that has got corrupted because of this desire to win in the short term, to be the best, because that brings commercial gains, because that's something that society seems to be valuing increasingly. We started to tell stories more about who won than about the journey to winning. And that's I think is where we're starting to see that balance tip away from the potential that sport has. And so I've been writing this book that came out kind of recently. Here's my little plug for it, The Long Win, where I really kind of have started to examine how we define winning. Is it about superiority? Is it about strength? Is it about who's the best? Or actually, is it a means of exploring our potential together? Is it a means of collaboration? The actual original meaning of the Latin competere, from which competition comes, is striving together. And for me, that's a great way to approach performance sport. We want to do better. We want to pursue excellence, but it shouldn't be striving against others. It shouldn't be doing better at the cost of others, that the aim is to defeat others, to make them look less valuable than we are as the winner. It should be this striving to explore what's possible together. And so I think, we need to focus on some different stories, more like the ones you showed at the beginning. Whereby we see winning as a kind of, and success as an ongoing journey to explore how we can use sport in different ways, how we can appreciate the social responsibility, if you like, aspect of it. And so just a quick word about the True Athlete Project that I love. They are really kind of doing some practical work with offering mentoring programs to athletes, but also workshops with sports, grassroots and elite, to put back in the things that have got lost, to put back in compassion in sport, to put back in mindfulness in sport, to bring conversations about values and identity and social responsibility, which can make it such a richer experience, both for the participants, the athletes, the elite athletes, the grassroots athletes, and the spectators. I'm going to pause there. There's so much more I could say. So yeah, thanks for showing the website there of yeah, do take a look, because they've got some great materials. It's growing all the time, and it's for me, it's offering you know, a bit of a support and a kind of antidote to the medals obsession that's gone a bit crazy in the UK. We've done, you know, we had this crisis in Atlanta where we won 1 gold medal, which was a national disaster, and that surely doesn't reflect the potential of sporting talent in our country. But now, you know, we've been on this mission. We won 29 gold medals in London. We were second in the medal table in Rio, second, just for our country of 60 million people. And people have even talked about what could we do to be top of the medal table, this sense of, you know, again, you know, we've got to be the best, we've got to be better than anyone. Let's pour more money in, let's see what else we can do, what other advantage we could get. And we've seen that an erosion of the experience of the athletes, the experience of the coaches, and the experience of the spectators. We've got athletes who are winning, saying, you know, they're depressed, doesn't mean anything, because that sporting moment was just the moment they crossed the line wasn't connected to something with a deeper meaning. So again, for me, winning isn't about a single moment in time. It's that needs to be connected to what's gone before and what comes after. We need to think about the why. Why do we want to win? Why is it important? What are we going to do with the responsibility that comes with being one of the best athletes in the world? These are some of the questions I think can really help us kind of get a bit back on track, if you like.
So great to hear about both projects, and I really encourage people to check out the Long Win for sure, and also the True Athlete Project. Easy enough to check it out, have a look, and check out Kath Bishop's website as well, and all the different things she's involved in. Kath, do you think it's possible to win, to do well, to still have performance results, to do your best, to achieve world records and all these things we strive for, without it being at all costs? Do you think it can be done while also caring for the health, mental and physical, of those involved, not just the athletes, but anyone involved? Do you think it's possible? And if so, how? What's it take?
I mean, absolutely. I think it's the next competitive advantage. And I think we're seeing some of the costs of this sort of short-term effort to get medals in has meant that athlete retention is really suffering across UK and British Olympic sports. And the attraction of the next generation is also, the pipeline is suffering, because people are going, I don't want to do that. You know, that doesn't look fun. That's not inspiring to have that experience that's kind of going to really maybe give me some long-term physical, mental health challenges through this. So I absolutely think we have to change if we are serious about performance. And I think what we could unlock is a much you know, maybe a kind of a longer term careers that last longer, because we don't force people to race when they're injured. So actually their career can go on. So maybe they might win a couple of years later, but actually have that opportunity to explore who they are along the way, maybe to study for a year, maybe to do some other things on that journey, so that it's not at all costs. And actually, I think we could have a much richer experience in elite sport. And I think we have to, because actually we are falling off the curve now. You know, I think we've gone as far as we can with the win at all costs mentality. And a performance mindset means we've got to learn what worked, what didn't work, and how do we actually now create, you know, the next level of performance. And for me, it has to be through focusing on welfare, well-being, culture, and the kind of bigger social responsibility, social context in which athletes operate. We have an amazing guy at the moment, a footballer. I don't know how much that's sort of been shown over there, a Manchester United footballer, Marcus Rashford, who's 22 years old and has basically taken on our government to ensure that a scheme providing vouchers for food in school holidays is extended, and you know, particularly in these challenging times during COVID, that this is taken on in the next holidays, and that the government should take it on. And he has just, you know, played an incredible game of football, his first ever kind of hat trick in international, you know, at a kind of European game. And you know, for me, he's a great role model, because it's not affecting his performance on the pitch. Quite the opposite. And he's just speaking this language of compassion, of understanding, and using his privileged position now to say, I'm not forgetting my roots, because I was one of those kids that didn't have food in the holidays, and my mum, you know, single parent, and couldn't afford to kind of feed us, and the holidays were tough. So he, for me, is kind of also accelerating some change, if you like, and showing the way I mean, Black Lives Matters has also shown how athletes can have a voice and really make a difference. So there's some powerful role models at the moment taking the social responsibility piece to the next level.
I love it so much. And I want to invite people to either put their hand up if you go to participants, and then you can raise your hand, or put your question in the chat, and we can invite you to turn your mic on and ask it and interact with Kath a bit here. But we have a question already about, this idea of the funding models. And I think both our countries are going through this, where the funding is tied to the medal. And so how do we navigate that tricky situation? What do you think?
Yeah, well, if success is about only the medal, then that's what you do. And then you end up in the situation we're in. So we absolutely have to change the incentives, what we're valuing. If we are only valuing the medal, then we're also saying at the same time, we're not valuing welfare. We're not valuing the health of an athlete. We're not valuing the health of coaches either, because coaches are losing jobs if they're not winning medals kind of in the short term. So we absolutely have to shift that. That is one of the mechanisms we have to show that we are going to, appreciate value in a different way. The challenge is we love metrics, don't we? God, we love medal tables. We love the easiness, but that doesn't mean that because something isn't easy to measure, we shouldn't do it. And that's the trap that we fall in across organizations, across society, which I hope we might slowly be realizing some of the things we're missing out on there. So I actually love this conversation that I'm sort of provoking and part of at the moment about how do we measure success in sport beyond the medal? And for me, stories is actually a really important part of it. It's not okay to win a medal and then have an athlete sort of depressed, never wanting anything to do with that sport again. Some of the stories that have come out around gymnastics around the world, for me, that shows unacceptable picture of success. That's not the success that we want. That's not what spectators want to see. They will now watch gymnastics through a very different lens. And it's going to take some time for the gymnastics clubs and sport to kind of really get themselves, to a place where the next generation are going to want to be part of it at the level required. So, for me, we need to tell some different stories, make sure those Invictus stories, they aren't just, the week of Invictus Games. They aren't just a little novelty. No, they are the heart of what sport is about. And so for me, it's as important what happens after the competition as at the competition. It's a bit like the climbing Everest thing. Lots of people lose their lives on the way down because everyone focuses on getting to the peak. And it's all about getting to the peak. But in my mind, that's not that great if you die on the way down. And that kind of, for me, is a little bit what we're doing with sport. It's all about the win, but then hang on, people's lives are being destroyed in the process. That's not okay, and it's not sustainable. It hurts us as a society, not just those individuals, because suddenly the values that are being displayed are not ones that we want in our homes, in our schools, in our workplaces. So, yes, the short answer would have been funding must change. But yes, for lots of reasons.
Yeah, and a number of participants have highlighted that need to redefine our conceptualization of winning, because then you get the sort of flippant response. Oh, well, now we're talking about participation ribbons, and it's an either or, a very zero sum attitude. But of course, we can just expand the frame of winning, can't we, to include health and well-being as well.
Exactly. And actually, if you cut those things down, then you can't compete if you're not well. If you're mentally and physically compromised, you can't compete. And your career is shortened. So it doesn't, this is absolutely about pursuing excellence in a different way. I think it's also about valuing, performance in a broader sense than purely, one race. Again, if you break a world record in training, oh, well, if you can't do it and the medal's given out, it doesn't count. What? That's crazy. You've just kind of blasted a barrier. That's so exciting. So I think, again, when we look at an Olympic race, everyone in that race makes the final brilliant. And often it's the things that others have done in the race that have enabled the winner to do something different. So why do we only celebrate the winner when actually it was part of, everyone had a part in that race. The winner can't do the Olympic final on their own. That doesn't work. We need everyone. So why do we then devalue the others, discard them, call them failures, when they were part of an amazing race that maybe saw a world record broken, and everyone played a part of that world record being broken, not just the winner, because they all made decisions and played tactical games that created that elite performance. I think tennis often is a great example of some of those amazing Grand Slam finals with Federer and Nadal, where, they need each other. They are striving together to raise the level of tennis, to take it to the next level. That's the game. That's, for me, the win, is that we've taken sport to the next level. We've expanded what's possible. That, for me, is really exciting. Not just somebody's thrashing someone else and they're a better human being. That really holds us back from exploring the potential. So I'm absolutely pro performance, pro excellence, and against competition where it's holding us back from exploring our potential.
Beautiful. That reminds me of the scrum in rugby, right? That we're literally interdependent in that game and actually bonded together. And I've watched a wonderful coach, trace a goal in soccer back to, or in field hockey. She coaches both, back to the one of the first passes, So she acknowledges all the kids along that whole process, and it's so beautiful. But also, celebrating the game. Look what you guys created. It was a 1-point game in basketball. Wow. Both teams contributed to creating that. Beautiful. We have a really great question here, and I know there are others. And then I want to get to make sure we have time for Larissa too, as long as your sound's working. How's it working, Larissa? Can I hear you? Okay. Helen asked a really important one that I've been wrestling with too. We talk lots about equity, and we talk a lot at Rural Roads about power and power to instead of power over, which I think links in well with Helen's question around colonialism. She says, given that the Canadian sport culture arises pretty prominently from the dominant colonizing culture, what's the role of sport? And what can we learn from the concepts of reconciliation, of trying to reconcile, ways of doing so that we're not always thinking in terms of power over, balancing that power? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that, Kath, if you've thought about it much?
I mean, it's a it's a big one, isn't it? And it's a very much a sort of Canadian context here. I'm trying to sort of think where our equivalent comes from. Certainly, I think the gender issue comes into my mind here, that we've inherited a lot of kind of very male-dominated sport traditions here, and even we've got sort of big controversy going on today that we have a lockdown coming in tonight, and grassroots sport isn't being supported, elite sport is being supported, and in that process it's a lot more men's sport because many women's sports aren't yet fully professional. And actually, even where they are professional, the men's football FA Cup is being continued and the women's isn't. It's all very complex, but it's really uncomfortable to see that starkly playing out in this other kind of socio-political context. So, culture, sport, I think, gives us an opportunity to do things differently. So in my mind, it's like, come on, guys, this is an opportunity where we could put sport onto an equal level in how we address it in our response to the global health pandemic. And, oh no, we've just kind of let that opportunity go past us. And I think the politicians haven't been, alert to it. And there is a sense where, the power of sport still doesn't kind of sit at the table enough in decision making around society. It's the connection point for me for some of our biggest health issues, whether it's obesity, education issues, engagement with sort of lower demographic areas, which, where there's a real struggle in academic performance, and physical activity could help that. And we don't use sport to link things up. I'm kind of going off on tangents because it's sparking lots of thoughts to me, but I think we definitely have to look back at where, the sporting culture is not one that we want to replicate or continue and has set certain trends. But the wonderful thing about sport is it can reinvent itself. It can change, it can be adaptable, and it often shows us how to change. What do you think about this the colonizing kind of context from your perspective, Jen?
Yeah, for me, it really has to be, we wrestle with it a lot at Rural Roads. We are on unceded territory, and we are in negotiation with the First Nations. So I think it's really important for us all to be thinking about colonialism. I mean, that castle is the direct result of colonialism. So it's a stark artifact facing us every day on our campus. And I'm not sure we address it fully. I think sport would be a perfect avenue to explore. I know we've hosted some symposiums looking at human rights through sport, and definitely has touched on on colonialism and this idea of the assumption that there's this hierarchy and some are more important than others and we can just kind of move in and take over is a real problem. And how do we first reconcile before we start moving in a new direction? We have to heal the wounds. And I think that goes for any population that has been unfairly treated. So when you touched on gender, I think it does, and race, it does link, but they're all, of course, different experiences. So I would like to invite Ellen to reach out to me on my via email, and maybe we can do some work together. I think it's a really important question to explore. And there are others, but I'm noticing time, and we've got Laryssa here that we want to hear from as well. So I want to thank Kath Bishop, and here's her information. Please feel free to explore Kath's work.
Do reach out, yeah.
Thank you, and thanks so much. Great to see you, and I know we'll be in touch. We're working on different things together. And now I'd like to introduce you to Larissa Beezenthal, who, I love this little picture here because, you know, she told me a story about a coach that really helped her not be forgotten. Both of us are probably not the typical talent ID athletes that would have been cherry picked, you know, for a boat, too small, too skinny. But here Larissa is the most medal grower in Canada. So I want to welcome Larissa to share her stories and her work that she's involved in the world as well. Welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So
okay.
good.
Awesome. It works. So I used to talk about the world of giants, right? I'm 5'7". I would lie about my height and trying to fit in, right? The big girl sport that I wanted to be a part of, but I was given a chance, and inclusiveness, the whole 9 yards. A coach looked at me for my size and my stature and made the adjustments needed for me, that I wasn't a cookie cutter athlete. I was smaller in stature, but why should that limit me from being able to do something? And so the coach that Jennifer's talking about, he specialized my rig and did all of these neat little finicky things. And then he said to the big girls, he goes, watch out, this little one's gonna come and get you, which was kind of nice, right? I'd been put down for so long, and then, yeah, had a great run, 6 years of medals, which were crazy, great coach, amazing fellow athletes. And I think there was someone in the chat that put, how was it not about medals? It was never about medals for me. It was about the process. It was about the journey. And most of all, it was about fun. So for me, I said to my office mate yesterday that when we got overseas, it was not that the work was done, but it was the show was about to start. It wasn't about this pressure, you got to go out and perform. It was like, wow, instead of doing 8 200 meters or 8 2-kilometer pieces, I have to do 1 today. This is awesome. And our coach, I believe, really helped with that mindset and the framing of the whole process for us, that it was about, you do what you can, you stay in your lane, you do your things right, the result's going to take care of itself. And I think what's happened in society right now, that these medals are spoken about instead of the process. And I believe it's more on the coaches and the admin staff that need to, because it was about the medals back for us too. Jen would probably laugh at this, Al saying, I've got 4 kids now, you guys. Yeah, I got to put food on the table as your coach. But it was a bit of a joke in that sense. So enough about that. But so athlete for 6 years for Canada, tons of fun, and then went into coaching. And I've kind of done the reverse trajectory of coaching, I would say. I coached through 3 Olympic cycles, 2 for Canada, and moved my 2-month-old baby and 2-year-old to Australia and did an Olympic cycle with them there also for 5 years, and then moved back to Canada and came into grassroots. So I went to a high school in Ottawa and taught everything from just learn to row to their best rowers to the club rowers, everything. And what I found through that And I was talking to one of the top members in World Rowing, and he mentioned to me too that society's got it wrong. They think they should put the best coaches with the best athletes, but the best athletes don't really need the best coaches. The best coaches need to be at the grassroots to make sure just what we've been talking about, that the excitement, the fun, the hook of the sport, the excitement, the passion to their core needs to be instilled with those young athletes. And for me, I didn't like it at first, right? I want to be at the show again. I'm an Olympic coach. But now that I've been here coming on 6 years, 7 years, I think, I believe there's more fulfillment in the student here at the school that is a gamer. He barely goes outside. He's on his computer 12, 14 hours a day. He got on a rowing boat with us and gets out of bed now at 9 o'clock in the morning. His dad has never seen this because this kid likes to row. And to me, that's a bigger win than any world championship, any World Cup, that we got little Orion out to play in the boats. And it's just super cool. Part of my other work I do is I work with World Rowing, and we go into different countries where they don't have rowing, or it's not as developed as it is for us in Canada and the UK, New Zealand, Australia. And I went to a training camp in Thailand a couple of years ago where we taught 32 different countries. 32 countries were there. We taught 6 different countries how to row for the first time. And one of the countries we taught was Nepal. And the pureness and quietness and just amazing, calm, quiet confidence in these 4 kids from Nepal was beauty that I had never seen before. And again, another experience for me, not an Olympic experience, but a coaching experience with these beautiful children who we still keep in touch with today. They'd have no rowboats in Nepal. They can't even row, but it's something that changed for them. They were the first Nepal ever at the Asian Junior Championships. And part of the things we do to make sure that these kids that we teach from these different countries get hooked is we teach them the Olympic values, and we teach them through play that what it feels like to exist in a certain mindset. So what is it like to feel joy of effort when you have tried your very, very best and it was so hard? You may feel yucky inside, like you're going to throw up because you went super hard. What does that feel like to have given your best? So the pre-brief in these games is important. The debrief is really important in these, to make sure that the kids are really getting these life lessons that the Olympians have, but bringing it back down to the grassroots. Joy of effort is another one. It's not about beating each other at all costs. It's about, again, doing your best to seeing how that turns out at the end of the day. So little game, just because World Rowing, one of their big factors is looking after Mother Earth, right? The water, we have to look after this resource and things like that. But the funnest game I think we played was unstructured play. We gave the kids a buoy, and we had the 2 boys at the end. And Adam Creek and I, another Olympic medalist, we called it row ball. And I'll just fast forward so you can look at the joy of these kids. And they're learning tons of skills and drills on these oar boards because they could bump into each other, but they're having fun at the base of it. The debrief with those kids is Lauren, one of them speaks, and she goes, "That's the most I've laughed in how many months?" And to me, another win, right? The kids learned all these skills and drills, the backing, the turning, the spinning, the competitive nature, all of these things without us telling them what to do. It was, again, that play and self-discovery. And for me, watching as a coach from the 3 Olympic cycles I coached at back down to the grassroots, I think what's happened is people want to emulate what's happening at the Olympic level, what's happening at the professional level. So they're trying to teach kids into little adults, where kids, adolescents, they still just want to play, right? So if we could bring back that passion and the excitement that just go out and have a go, I think we'd get our healthcare system would be way better. We'd have more people active because it's not so structured. It's not so deliberate. It's not so black and white. We would enable them to go out and have fun. And so OVAP is just a great way, teaching them the values and letting them go out and have fun. More so now that our kids want us to get all these oar boards instead of the rowboats because it was so much more fun, which that's kind of amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Larissa, for sharing. The video is so fun. I was looking through the rough cut the other night, and it looks like a great time. And I love those oar boards. Talk about accessibility. So I was just chatting with Daniel Gong here. He asked about the alienation between the Olympian and the regular folk who just want to play sport, you know, and we're creating this crazy gap. But something like an oar board is just a wonderful way to create accessibility to what looks like kind of a professional and exclusive and intimidating sport, rowing, right?
Well, I think, I don't know if it was you or when I was talking to Adam, but I was working outside, and I work at a private school right now. So, and I was outside working on the oars in the summer, and these kids came by and they looked in the boat shed, and the one girl said to the other girl, "Oh, what's that?" And she goes, "Oh, it's rowing. It's just a sport for rich kids." And I'm from a town of 4,000 people, well, we have water, but there's no place to row. And to me, that just hurt to the deep core of me, because sport should be for everyone. It shouldn't be looked at that this sport is elitist and this sport is for you and this sport is for you. We need to have it accessible and include anyone that wants to have a try. So the oar boards have just been fun. And if I can get out to every school in BC, I want to do the same thing.
Awesome. And other questions for Larissa? It's been great. You know, thanks, Kath and Larissa. I see you've been participating in the chat. It's so cool to have these multiple channels, right, where we can be discussing all at once. But people, please post your questions or just turn on a mic. I don't think we have that many people that we're going to be talking all over each other, although it's quite amazing how you've all stuck around so well here. Usually people leave at the hour because they have to go back to work or something. So it's great to see people. I would like to know a little bit more about how you discovered the OVAP program, how you gotten involved, and then how you found, you know, how you and Adam became a duo. And
so I'm trained as a FISA, a world rowing coach educator. So I went to a workshop, I think in Great Britain, a couple of years ago, where they picked a bunch of the development coaches that go into different countries and present these camps. And we went through a workshop, a 4-day weekend, where we put the games all together and had a think tank around them. We each kind of brought our favorite drills and skills that we wanted to do. And then there was a core group. Gwen Batten was working on it out of GB and writing up all the games and things like that. It's on the website though, which is kind of neat. So anyone can get the cards and things like that. And it's been good. Rowing was a pilot for the ILC to see how this would go in, well, schools and camps and different things like that. So that's where it's at right now with the ILC. I don't know what other sports are out there, but.
And then look at all these toolkits, right? And adapted to different languages, etc., and activity guidelines. So lots of great resources. If you're in education, this is an amazing resource. But then if you go and have a look at the actual OVAP site as well, beyond rowing, that's pretty interesting stuff too. I've been learning so much working with both of you this week.
Yeah, it's really a great program. And then I was at the Youth Olympics 2018, and we had thousands of kids coming through in Argentina presenting these games too. And again, it was a way that's not just for rowing, but the IOC wanted to, again, hook kids that sport is fun, but there's a purpose a little bit behind that, right? The teaching, it was like the real life, real-time classroom, but it was all based around physical activity. So we wanted to make sure that the kids were moving and learning lessons while they were moving. Sorry, someone's just got in the chat that adults need to do that too. And Adam and I were laughing so much that day that the next step we said too was, we want to get all our friends together and do this. This is like adult play also. It's not just kid play. And again, it's that mindset, right? That you trick yourself, you trick the kids, you trick everyone into exercise because they're just having so much fun. They're not even thinking about it. Where you think of what training generally is. It's a set, stagnant, this is training. But what if you can just have play for fun where they're getting the same benefits as what we're supposed to do? And I think to the core for me too, sports kind of lost a bit of that fundamental, which is fun, right? Amusement and joy. If you look up what fun is about, and the medals, we got to win, we got to do this. So much of that has taken away from the pure joy and the fun. So.
Yeah, and there was a comment earlier about that, you know, how do we shift from high performance to holistic? And I'm lucky, I think I've always had a lot of fun through my high performance sport experience, but I notice, you know, I'm rowing on the lake now for fun with my old buddies. But I watch the national team out there training, and I hope they're having fun, but they look so incredibly driven all the time. And I see a little bit of laughter, but it doesn't seem like as much as we had. We were just crazy people.
And I don't know. And Kathleen once said this to me, that there was the naiveness, and maybe that was because it was earlier on that I remember making jokes about, yeah, we're just training for the Olympics. Like, it was, people would look at us and be like, wow, really? We're like, well, yeah, we are. But, and there was just this pure joy behind it. And a lot of it seems, I find that people today talk about the sacrifice. Oh, it's a sacrifice. I'm an Olympic athlete. And I look back on my time and go, wow, that was a choice. There was no sacrifice with that. That was a choice that I decided I was going to put my life on hold to go out and play rowing for 10 years. It wasn't a sacrifice at all. So I think, again, it's that whole mind shift. And I equate a lot of it, Jen, to our coach, right? He kept us on track. And that's, I think, the downfall right now is we need to educate a lot more of the people in the sport admin side, because I think they get bought up into, it's about the medals, it's about this. And I get that it's for their jobs, but they have to know enough that if you're not in the right place with your mindset, you're not going to be able to deliver that. And I think that's what we learned so much through sport.
And Kath, how about you? What's your experience? What was your experience in those times?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I experienced both. I experienced that sort of fear-based, threat-based, you know, fear of failure, you know, and that sort of, you've got to win, if you like, desperation to win. And that was the sort of least successful part of my career and least enjoyable part of my career. And it was when we moved much more to this performance thinking, whereby it's, you know, it's the kind of everyday, you're getting successes on a daily basis. It's not just about winning. You know, what have you improved today from yesterday? That's took the pressure off. And of course, we were in such a better frame of mind then to perform. You know, I can remember sort of sitting on the start of the Olympics thinking, I've got to win, and I came nowhere. And then I can remember sitting on the start of you know, of an Olympics thinking, wow, I'm gonna bring my best and see what happens. And I ended up on the podium. You know, the experience inside my head was so different in each of those situations. The former was just awful place to be, and the latter was just wonderful, was just a kind of brilliant. I felt alive, excited, you know, come on, let's start the race, I want to do it. So, you know, how we frame it is so important. And I totally agree with Larissa about this sort of heavy mantra of pain and toughness, and, you know, also this sort of thing that if you lose, you've got to sort of, you know, beat yourself up and be grief-ridden. No future champion is happy about losing. So you've got to be really overt about how awful it is, how terrible it is that you lost. That just sucks up energy. It's miserable, and it distracts you from actually working out how to go faster next time. So I do think there's this sort of slightly macho narrative sometimes, but I don't know why it's still so dominant. But I guess people learn it and repeat it, and it feels heroic. It feels sort of strong in a way, but it holds us back from performance, where play, you know, I put something in the chat, to be in the zone in a race is that place in your mind where you're totally absorbed in what you're doing, totally present. And so to get your best outcome, you need to stop thinking about the outcome, because when you are absorbed in the moment, you're not thinking about the outcome. You're just thinking about that stroke. You're taking that moment. So I really think, you know, when you think about that kind of, you know, play is very much associated with that kind of in the zone, being in the flow, all of those sort of concepts where we're at our best, where we're really creative, really resilient, and able to problem solve. You know, one of the things you mentioned kind of right at the beginning.
Oh, it's so fun. I'm hearing from some former students, Kelly Boyden, great to see you out there. But he talks about being involved in the Invictus Games in the chat here. And medals can be a rallying point for some and not for others. It kind of depends. But everyone was celebrated, including the medalists. So there's that point about, you know, everyone's contributing. I love that. That's something we could all take a lead on here to push that people be recognized. It's funny. I've heard a response to that as being kind of, you just want, you know, especially if it's, I don't know, your team that was the losing team, you know, they assume that you just want the celebration as well, instead of the principle that no, everybody's part of the actual contest and contributing to making it wonderful. And a big question from Sarah Didier here, as Olympians, concerned with social change, how do you personally reconcile your love for the Olympics and the controversy around the games? Lots of controversies around the games. I mean, I competed during huge, I mean, it's still going on, but doping was a big deal, and had to really work. We had to problem solve definitely through that and figure out our way to get back to why we're doing it, what we love, but also it's about going really fast backwards and it isn't about winning the medal. And once we let go of that medal, it really did work out for us, because we were frankly focused on the right thing, which enhances performance. It's not just sort of letting go of something and everything working out for you. It's about shifting your focus, mindset, framing, things both of our guests have been highlighting. What about the two of you? Larissa, what do you say? How do you feel about some of the controversies that emerge around the Olympic Games?
I think it's hard because it is, I think it's moving away from where it's meant to be, in a sense. And so there's that side of me that gets nostalgic, and it just has to go back to being the pure sport that it was. But I think what you said, we knew that we had people doping and stuff when we were competing too, and we couldn't control that. We couldn't do anything about that. It's kind of, you're born with brown hair but you want blonde hair, right? You can't change that. You can't change what's going on out there. You stay in your lane, you control what you can control, and at the end of the day, you ultimately control how you feel about that experience. You can downward spiral and the glass is half empty, or you can, again, glass is half full and I'm going to enjoy every moment of this, and what happens at the end of it, that's all I can do. And Kath said it, right? If I always talk to the athletes when I'm coaching or when I was an athlete, if you're brushing your teeth at night, looking in the mirror, you and only you are the one that knows what you did out on the field of play. Did you give 100%? Did you give 50%? Did you give 20%? And that's your self-reflection. So your own answer to you is at the core of it, which is your own fulfillment. So it's kind of what I'm.
Kath, final thoughts? I'd like to hear from you. And then there's one last comment that I'd like us to reflect on, but we have to wrap up, I know, too. I can see Alana getting antsy.
I'm deeply troubled by where we are. I think we are in crisis, as you said, and therefore that's actually why I want to sort of speak out more. It's partly why I wrote the book. It's partly why I'm involved with True Athlete Project, to play a role in reshaping what a sporting environment looks like, to remind people of the positive potential. And to show, you know, that actually the kind of, we've got alternatives, we've got other ways of doing it. And I think we're reaching a bit of a crisis at lots of different levels. There's a whole environmental crisis we haven't touched on around, you know, the destruction in some of the cities where the Olympics has been held, that I feel really, really, really troubles me. And so, you know, yeah, these are all conversations that we actually can only solve kind of collaboratively as well. And actually, if we do manage to find a better way to, you know, change the system of where we have the Olympics and whether we have regular cities or how we kind of do it, all of that, I think, could actually, you know, put us in such a better place. So that's the opportunity to think about environmental issues, social issues, issues of values and respect. You know, actually we could make a difference in sport, and that might actually also have an impact elsewhere. So yeah, that's why I kind of really keen to kind of support the work of the True Athlete Project. Kind of, for me, that's one of the sort of mechanisms I'm most practically involved with. But you know, yeah, it is troubling. It is troubling, and the Olympics needs to address these things.
And the last two are giant questions, but you know, I think we've touched on it as well around the pandemic. And Cathy mentioned, you know, we need to take advantage of the fact that we're in these crises to, it does reveal starkly, love that word, a stark revelation of laying bare the issues. So Matt Gooch talks about it, Steve Van Moon mentions it in the chat as well, like it's revealing, laying bare for us what our issues are. And now's the time, right? We have to acknowledge. I love this idea of collaboration too, of linking arms, because look at all the people on this webinar even today, and we've had lots of people involved in related discussions. So there are lots of people willing to get together, and that's how you and I met each other, Kath, is connecting on this shared interest. And we just have to keep staying connected and working together. The more people we have rallying for change, the better. And so you'll be hearing from me. And anyone who wants to link arms with us, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you and get you involved in different kinds of initiatives that we're all involved in. We're a learning community, right? So let's stick together and keep fighting. And thank you all for coming. This is recorded, and we will send out the link. So if you want to share it around, that would be great. Please reach out and stay in touch. Thanks, everybody. Take care, Kath. Thanks so much, Larissa. And thanks to our wonderful Railroads team for all your support in putting this on. Take care, everybody.